You didn't become cold by accident. You just learned that feeling hurts. You grew up blaming yourself for wounds that were never yours. Now you live like someone hiding, trying to look strong, while bleeding quietly. But what if I told you it wasn't your fault, that the child inside you is still waiting and waiting to be seen? And what if I showed you there's a place where you don't have to perform, don't have to pretend, don't have to punish yourself anymore. Just stay with me, because the truth is coming, and it's going to set you free. You didn't deserve that silence. You didn't deserve that punishment. You didn't deserve to carry blame for things you didn't even understand, but you did. Not because you were weak, but because you were small, and no one taught you how to process what hurt, so you blamed yourself. Because when you're a child and love is absent, rejection feels like justice. When your tears are ignored, you assume your pain is wrong. And now, you're still punishing yourself, in the way you talk to yourself, in the way you choose people who hurt you, in the way you try to be perfect just to avoid that same silence from happening again. But here's the truth. That wasn't your guilt. That was someone else's absence. And you've been bleeding from a wound that wasn't yours. To begin with, they told you to stop crying, so you stopped showing emotion. They mocked your sensitivity, so you buried your vulnerability. They withheld love when you failed, so now you overachieve, afraid that making one mistake will cost you everything. You became what they conditioned you to be, not who you really are. And now as an adult, you look like someone who has it together, but you're exhausted. You're tired because you're still trying to fix what your inner child never got. Still trying to be worthy of a love that was never taught to you. Still trying to be enough for people who never knew what enough even meant. And the worst part? You think this self-punishment is discipline. You think it's maturity. But it's just trauma, wrapped in the language of survival. You apologize too much. You feel guilty for resting. You replay conversations obsessively, wondering if you were too much again. You shrink yourself when you're actually meant to lead. You allow others to cross your boundaries, just to avoid the confrontation you were never allowed to express. You live your life on high alert, expecting abandonment, because that's how your nervous system was trained. You've been waiting for permission to heal, waiting for a voice to say, "You can stop now. You're safe. You did nothing wrong." So let me be that voice today. You did nothing wrong. You were just a child trying to survive in an environment that mistook control for love. And now, let's talk about the part they never mention in psychology books. The part Freud observed but couldn't fully explain. The father-shaped hole. That deep, aching space inside you that even therapy can't fully reach. Because beneath all this guilt is a longing to be fully known, to be fully seen, to be fully embraced by someone who sees everything about you and still says, "I want you." That's not just psychology. That's spirit. And that's where Jesus enters, not the religion, not the performance, not the institution that failed you. I'm talking about the Father you always needed, the counselor that sits with your pain, not above it, the healer who doesn't shame your wounds, he bears them. Jesus is not intimidated by your guilt. He saw that moment when they ignored you. He saw the night you cried into your pillow, pretending to be strong. He saw the shame you carry, and he never walked away. Where others silenced your pain, he listens. Where others withheld love, he pours it out. Where others used fear to control you, he offers peace that doesn't demand perfection. And in his eyes, you are not a mistake trying to behave. You are a son, you are a daughter, you are not the sum of your trauma. You are the child he never stopped waiting for. You don't need to punish yourself anymore. You don't need to overperform just to feel worthy. You don't need to keep choosing pain because it's familiar. You don't need to carry the voice that said, "You'll never be enough," because he's enough. And in him, you're safe enough to stop pretending, to stop punishing, to stop hiding, and finally say, "I was just a child, but now I know who my Father is." There's a voice inside your mind that knows exactly how to hurt you. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It calls you names when you fail, it mocks you when you try. It tells you you're always doing too much or never enough. It doesn't wait for the world to criticize you. It gets there first. And the cruelest part? You believe it's your own voice, but it's not. That voice is a copy, a distorted echo of someone else's disappointment. It was modeled after the people who didn't know how to love you, the ones who spoke with silence, with harshness, with absence. You weren't born thinking you were a burden. Someone made you feel that way. As a child, you absorbed tone, tension, disapproval, even when no one said a word. And now you repeat it to yourself daily. You carry it like armor, hoping it will make you stronger, but it only keeps you wounded. You call it inner critic. Freud called it the super-ego, the lawmaker of the unconscious, shaped by authority, figures in your early life, parents, teachers, religion, culture, all colliding inside your psyche and sculpting a voice that now lives rent-free in your mind, not to help you, but to dominate you. You don't have an identity, you have programming. You're not living with thoughts, you're living with recorded judgments. You're not failing, you're reenacting a script written before you. Knew how to read. And every time you try to silence it, it grows louder, because your silence is exactly what it feeds on. But there's something deeper here. You don't keep that voice because you like pain. You keep it because it's familiar. It feels like home. It reminds you of the way you used to feel, small, scared, desperate to please. That voice makes you feel in control. Like if you punish yourself first, no one else will. Like if you stay quiet, no one will abandon you. So you live trying to manage the voice instead of questioning it. You let it judge every move you make, every word you say, every tear you try to hide. And here's what's even darker. Sometimes that voice sounds like someone you used to love. A father, a mother, a person who raised you with conditions instead of care. And because you never healed, you internalize their opinion as truth. You're not stuck because you're weak. You're stuck because no one ever told you. That voice is not you. That voice is not God. That voice is not the truth. Let me show you the difference. That voice uses fear. Jesus speaks with peace. That voice controls through guilt. Jesus frees with grace. That voice points to your past. Jesus redefines your future. You've been living with a voice that demands perfection. But Jesus never asked for your perfection. He asked for your heart. He doesn't need your performance. He needs your permission. He's not the judge who screams from a distance. He's the counselor who kneels beside you, whispering the opposite of what you've always heard. You are not a mistake. You don't have to earn my love. I chose you, even with that voice inside you, and I came to replace it. He doesn't erase your mind. He renews it. He doesn't silence your thoughts with force. He speaks louder with truth. He rewrites the script with love, not law, with presence, not pressure, with mercy, not metrics. He gives you something the voice never could: rest, real rest, soul rest. And here's the invitation. The next time that voice attacks you, ask yourself, does this sound like someone who died to save me? Because that's what Jesus did. Not for who you pretend to be, but for the child you buried, for the voice you believed, for the silence you mistook for safety. He became the father that your inner child needed. He became the truth that your mind never heard. And today, he's not asking you to fight that voice alone. He's offering to speak over it, louder, kinder, forever. But you have to let go. You have to say, this voice isn't mine, and I'm done living by its lies. Because when you make room for the real voice, the voice of Jesus, that old critic loses power. It can scream all it wants, but it won't decide your life anymore. The final word won't come from your trauma, it will come from your healer. You wake up early, you work hard, you push yourself beyond exhaustion, and still you feel like it's not enough. You never allow yourself to rest, to breathe, to slow down. You punish every mistake, replay every word you shouldn't have said, and second-guess every emotion that dares to rise. And you've convinced yourself this is strength. You call it discipline, self-control, growth. But the truth is much harder to admit. This isn't discipline. This is fear wearing a mask. It's the fear of being insignificant, of failing, of being rejected if you don't perform. This obsession with control didn't come from wisdom. It came from survival. Because somewhere deep inside you learned that love was conditional. That safety came only after perfection. That peace was something you had to earn, never just receive. And so you built this rigid system inside yourself. A personal tyrant that never lets you feel proud, never lets you enjoy what you've achieved, never gives you permission to exhale. Freud would call this your super-ego gone wild, a defense mechanism turned dictator. It's supposed to keep you in check, but it has become the very thing holding you captive. You set unrealistic goals, destroy yourself trying to reach them, then shame yourself when you fail. You reject praise because it feels foreign. You downplay your pain because vulnerability feels like weakness. You don't ask for help, not because you don't need it, but because somewhere, someone made you believe you're only lovable when you're self-sufficient. And now, you don't rest. Because somewhere along the way, rest became guilt. Stillness became danger. Relaxing felt too much like giving up, and giving up always led to punishment. So you keep running. Not toward something, but away from something. You run from the little child in you who was once shamed for being messy, sensitive, slow. You're still trying to silence the voices that said, try harder, be better, don't feel, don't stop. But no matter how fast you run, that child is still inside you, watching, waiting, exhausted, desperate to be heard. And here's the terrifying truth. Unless you confront this fear, you'll pass it on. To your children, to your relationships, to everyone who loves you. You'll model the same pattern, discipline that crushes, excellence without love, performance without connection. You'll raise yourself all over again or through others. That's how trauma survives, not through memory, but through repetition. But listen, not every voice in your head is yours, and not every rule you follow is right. Sometimes what you've called high standards are just trauma rituals. What you've called being focused is just anxiety trying to hide. What you've called growth is really a slow death under the weight of impossible expectations. So here's the question. When will you allow grace to enter your system? When will you stop treating yourself like a machine? When will you forgive yourself for being human? This is where Jesus, not the religion, not the dogma, but the real person, steps in. He doesn't ask for your perfection. He never has. He doesn't admire your constant effort to earn something he already gave you. He doesn't applaud your self-punishment. He sees the fear behind your achievements. And he gently breaks it, not with shame, but with truth. Jesus is not the voice that drives you harder. He is the voice that says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Not the fake rest where you pretend to stop, but the deep rest where your soul finally stops running. He is the Father who doesn't love you because you produce. He loves you before you do anything. He calls you son. He calls you daughter. And he never ties your worth to your output. With Jesus, discipline isn't a punishment. It becomes peace. It becomes protection, not pressure. It becomes a choice, not a chain. He teaches you how to live with intention, not with fear. He shows you how to breathe again, how to enjoy again, how to feel without drowning. He reminds you, I didn't die for your performance, I died for your freedom. That's not weakness, that's restoration, that's home. And when you finally lay down the whip you've used on yourself, when you finally stop measuring your value by your results, you'll realize something sacred. You were never meant to carry the world, you were meant to walk with the one who already did. You know it's going to hurt. You see the signs, the patterns, the red flags. But still, you go. Still, you stay. Still, you return to the place where love is a battlefield and comfort is a trap. You tell yourself it's different now, that maybe they've changed, that maybe you've changed, but deep down, you're not convinced. You're not stupid, you're wounded. That's why you keep choosing pain. Because pain, when repeated enough, starts to feel like home. You've grown used to the ache, you've learned how to survive in chaos. You know how to walk on eggshells. You know how to shrink yourself. You know how to feel unwanted and pretend. It's fine. You call it love, but it's not love. It's survival dressed in nostalgia. It's your inner child trying to re-enter the story that broke her, hoping this time the ending will be different. But it never is, because you're not replaying the past to fix it. You're replaying it because it's the only script you know. Freud called this the repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to return to trauma, to reenact unresolved pain in new relationships, hoping to master what once overwhelmed you. But here's the tragic irony. You don't master it, it masters you. And every time you choose someone who wounds you, you're not healing. You're bleeding in circles. You crave love, but you chase it in the arms of people who echo your original wound. People who withhold affection. People who invalidate your feelings. People who demand performance over presence. It's not because you're broken. It's because your nervous system was trained to confuse pain with connection. Somewhere along the way, pain became proof that you cared, that you were alive, that you still had something to lose. And now, you don't trust peace. You don't trust kindness. You sabotage stability because it feels foreign. And so without realizing, you gravitate toward the same patterns, the same emotional punishment, the same emptiness wrapped in temporary affection. You don't choose pain consciously, your pain chooses for you. Because the past is still holding the map. And as long as the child inside you is steering the wheel, you'll keep driving back to the house that caught fire, just to prove that next time you can put it out. But some houses weren't meant to be rebuilt. Some were meant to be left behind. This is where truth begins. Not in blaming yourself, but in recognizing that your choices are not random. Your heart is searching for justice, for repair, for the love you deserved but never received. You want to rewrite your story, but you're still using the same characters. And here's the wake-up call. You can't heal in the same place you were hurt. You can't fix yourself by punishing yourself. You can't find love by chasing versions of your original rejection. Healing doesn't come through repetition. It comes through confrontation, through recognition, through surrender. And now, we shift from Freud to freedom. Because what psychology observes, Jesus heals. He doesn't just name the pattern, he breaks it. He doesn't say try again, he says come to me. Not to perform, not to earn, but to rest, to be restored, to be reparented by the one who doesn't wound when you're weak, the father who doesn't leave when you mess up, the counselor who doesn't just analyze your wounds, he carries them. Jesus doesn't need you to repeat the pain to prove you're worthy. He already paid for your peace. He already broke the curse. He already faced the fire and walked out carrying your name. So let me ask you this. What if you stopped running back? What if you stopped choosing what hurts just because it's familiar? What if you believed, and for the first time, that love can be gentle, safe, patient? What if you finally said, I'm done living inside this loop. I want something holy. I want something new. Jesus isn't offering you another chapter in your trauma. He's offering you a whole new book, one where you don't have to earn affection by suffering, one where peace doesn't scare you, one where love doesn't leave when you stop performing. And that story starts when you let him rewrite your definition of love. Because love isn't chaos. Love isn't pain. Love isn't cold, distant, manipulative. Love is a person. And that person is waiting. Not at the end of your healing. Not when you finally get it right. He's here now, in the ashes, in the confusion, in the moment you realize that pain isn't your destiny. It was your doorway to redemption. And if you walk through it, if you dare to say, no more, you'll hear another voice whisper through the flames, you were never created for this pain. You were created for me. They say you're distant. They say you're cold. They say you never open up. And maybe they're right. But what they don't understand is that silence is safer than exposure. Detachment is protection. Numbness is survival. You didn't choose to become this version of yourself because you wanted to be hard. You became this way because somewhere along the way, vulnerability stopped being safe. You learned that being open led to being overlooked, that trusting people gave them permission to hurt you, that speaking your truth only made the room colder. So you stopped. You closed the door. You trained your face to show nothing. You called it strength, but it was just scar tissue. And now you look calm on the outside, but inside you're bleeding quietly, daily, and no one sees it because you made it look clean. You grew up fast, maybe too fast, maybe before your brain even finished wiring itself. You had to become responsible when you were still broken. You had to carry emotions you didn't know how to name. You learned to absorb pain with a smile, to walk away without closure, to function without connection. And now as an adult, your nervous system is still living in survival mode. You don't trust easily. You prepare for abandonment like it's inevitable. You don't expect people to stay, and so you leave first emotionally. You're not cold because you hate people. You're cold because your warmth wasn't protected. And what Freud observed so clearly, what he called defense mechanisms, is exactly what's keeping you from feeling anything real. Your emotional walls aren't flaws. They're evidence that something sacred was violated. And now you're just trying not to break again. But there's a cost to this silence. The more you push people away, the more you forget how to be touched. The longer you avoid expressing, the more your body starts speaking through exhaustion, illness, and anxiety. You scroll through life like a ghost, present but unreachable. In the name of self-protection, you're building a life without intimacy. And deep down, you know, this is not what you were created for. You long to be known, to be understood without having to explain, to be held without the fear of being dropped. But you no longer believe it's possible, because you've spent years watching people misread your silence as apathy, your pain as pride, your withdrawal as arrogance. And you got tired of trying to explain something even you don't fully understand. So you made a deal with yourself. I'll just stay quiet. At least it hurts less. But that's the lie. It still hurts. It just hurts in secret. It still affects your relationships, your sleep, your self-worth. It still makes you feel alone even in a room full of people. And here's where the world fails. It teaches you to fake healing, to manage symptoms, to keep performing. But no one taught you how to grieve. No one taught you how to cry without apologizing. No one taught you that feeling broken doesn't make you unworthy. But someone did, and his name is Jesus. He's not afraid of your silence. He doesn't get uncomfortable around your numbness. He doesn't walk away when you have nothing left to give. He comes close. He kneels beside the version of you that's frozen, locked up, and tired of pretending. He doesn't say, "Cheer up." He says, "I know, I saw it. I felt it too." And while Freud uncovered the defenses, Jesus becomes the safe space where you no longer need them. He is the Father that listens without fixing, that waits without rushing, that heals without pressure. He doesn't ask you to open up all at once. He offers to sit with you in the dark until the light comes back. And maybe today you don't need another explanation. Maybe you just need permission. Permission to be soft again, to be real again, to let yourself need, to let yourself feel. You're not weak for wanting connection. You're not broken for needing presence. And you're not hopeless just because you've grown cold, because there's still a fire under the ash. There's still a heart under the armor. There's still a child inside the silence, waiting for someone who won't leave when things get uncomfortable. That someone already came. He's not intimidated by your past. He's not shocked by your defenses. He knows the story behind every scar, and he still calls you worthy of warmth, not earned, not forced, but freely given. Because in his presence, you don't have to be strong. You don't have to hide. You don't have to bleed alone anymore. You are safe now. Not because the world changed, but because the one who never left just whispered, "You don't have to be cold anymore. You can come home." You finally sit down and your mind starts racing. You cancel plans and guilt creeps in. You try to relax and a whisper says, "You're wasting time." Sound familiar? It's because rest isn't peace for you. It's punishment. You don't know how to slow down without feeling lazy. You don't know how to receive without earning. And deep down, even when everything is okay, you feel like you've forgotten something, something urgent. That feeling, that's not instinct, that's trauma, that's conditioning. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that pain equals value. That the more you suffer, the more worthy you are. That if you're not producing, you're falling behind. You were praised for enduring, for tolerating, for going without. And now, even when you have the chance to rest, you can't. Because you were trained to believe that stillness is failure, that softness is weakness, and that recovery is a waste of time. Freud would call this the moral masochism of the superego, the internalized need to be punished, not for what you did, but for what you feel, for being alive, for needing help, for simply existing. That's why you always over-explain, overcompensate, overwork. It's not excellence, it's fear dressed up as discipline. And the most dangerous part? You get praised for it. People admire your drive. They call you strong. But they don't see the cost. They don't see the nights you lie awake rehearsing, conversations, the shame you feel for doing nothing on your day off, the way your body keeps the score with fatigue, tension, and chronic anxiety. They don't know that inside the high-functioning version of you lives a scared child, one who still thinks love is earned by suffering. You didn't create this. It was passed down. Maybe you grew up watching your parents push through. Life on survival mode. Maybe you watched them rest only when their bodies broke. Maybe no one ever told you that you're allowed to feel safe, to feel joy without guilt, to exist without a reason. And so you inherited a gospel of exhaustion, a belief that suffering is noble, that burnout is a badge of honor, and that healing is selfish. But let me ask you something. Who taught you that suffering is the only way to feel alive? Who taught you that stillness is dangerous? Who convinced you that you must constantly fight in order to deserve peace? Let me tell you, it wasn't Jesus. He never required performance. He never asked for burnout. He never called you only to use you. He called you to walk with him, not race for him. He is not the voice telling you to hustle harder. He is the voice saying, lie down, I'll watch over you. While the world screams, do more, he whispers, be still. While trauma tells, you earn your worth, he says, I gave it to you before you could ask. Jesus doesn't applaud your exhaustion. He weeps for it. He doesn't glorify your endless pushing. He offers something radical, rest that restores identity, rest that doesn't need permission, rest that heals what ambition can't reach. He is the father you never had, the one who says, I'm proud of you even when you're not producing. He is the counselor who reminds you, resting is not quitting, it's returning. Returning to your original design. Returning to the sacred truth that you were never made to burn out proving your worth. You were made to live from a place of fullness, not emptiness. And if that sounds impossible, it's because your definition of rest has been poisoned. But Jesus came to redeem that too, to show you that rest isn't absence, it's presence. It's not just stopping, it's being with Him. So today, what if you stopped apologizing for needing to breathe? What if you honored the ache in your body instead of ignoring it? What if you believed that peace is not earned at the end of your pain, but received at the beginning of your surrender? Jesus isn't waiting for you to break down. He's inviting you to lie down. In Him, you don't have to collapse to find comfort. You just have to come, not strong, not perfect, just real. Because in His presence, rest isn't rebellion. It's worship. You don't have to die climbing mountains He never asked you to climb. You don't have to collapse in front of people who only cheer when you're standing. You can rest. Right here, right now. And hear Him say, you don't have to earn my love, you already have it. Now breathe. You say sorry for everything, for speaking, for crying, for asking, for needing. You apologize when someone bumps into you. You feel guilty for taking up space. You feel like a burden in conversations, in relationships, even in silence. And it's not politeness, it's not humility, it's shame. It's the silent belief that your existence inconveniences the world, that you're too much or not enough. And this didn't come out of nowhere. This was planted early. Maybe it was the way your parents sighed when you cried, the way they got irritated when you needed help, the way people dismissed you, ignored you, mocked your feelings. You learned that being yourself was dangerous, that your presence caused problems. That love had to be earned through invisibility. So you shrank, you swallowed your voice, you became smaller than your soul was ever meant to be. And now as an adult, you carry the weight of every room you walk into, convinced that you're the one tipping it out of balance. Freud observed this internalized voice of guilt, the superego transformed into a punisher. It's not just about what you do. It attacks who you are, and when shame becomes your identity, everything becomes your fault. You become hyper-aware of everyone's emotions, trying to anticipate their reactions, walking on emotional eggshells just to feel somewhat safe. You analyze every word you speak, replay every mistake, and beat yourself up for things no one even noticed. But inside you feel like a fraud, like someone who's always about to mess it all up. You carry the fear that at any moment someone will realize you're not enough, that you're not lovable, that you don't belong. This constant Apology for being human. That's not humility. It's trauma. That's the residue of rejection. That's your nervous system screaming for safety in a world that made you feel unworthy from the start. You weren't born with this shame. You were taught it. And like a virus, it spread into every area of your life. Relationships, work, self-image, even your view of God. Especially your view of God. Because if the people who were supposed to love you made you feel like a burden, how can a perfect God do differently? So you turned him into another voice of shame, another judge, another standard you could never reach. But that voice isn't him. That system isn't his. That guilt isn't your portion, because Jesus doesn't come to expose your shame. He comes to carry it. He doesn't ask you to apologize for existing. He reaffirms that your existence was his idea. He's not the one condemning you. He's the one who was condemned, so you wouldn't have to be. You think you're in the way? He says, you are the reason I came. You think you're too much? He says, you are my joy. You think you have to shrink to be loved? He says, I loved you before you were even shaped in your mother's womb. Jesus is not the echo of your childhood trauma. He is the contradiction of it. The father who doesn't get annoyed when you cry. The counselor who doesn't roll his eyes when you confess. The redeemer who doesn't flinch when you show your scars. He doesn't just tolerate your presence, he celebrates it. And in his presence, you don't have to earn the right to exist. You don't have to beg for affection. You don't have to tiptoe around the throne of grace. You walk in boldly, not because of who you are, but because of who he is. Let this truth pierce the guilt. You are not an inconvenience. You are not a mistake. You are not too much. You are not a burden. You are chosen. You are beloved. You are covered. And you never again have to apologize for breathing. Jesus died to silence that inner voice, the one that always finds fault, always calls you less, always demands more. He replaced it with a new name, mine. And once you hear that name, shame loses its grip. You start walking taller. You start breathing deeper. You stop editing yourself just to be accepted. You stop apologizing for taking up space, because now you know you were never in the way. You were always in his heart. You've spent most of your life trying to grow up, trying to be strong, trying to act like nothing ever affected you. You've built routines, personas, achievements, all to prove that you're no longer that vulnerable, scared, needy version of yourself. You tell people you're fine. You tell yourself to move on. But in the quiet moments and when no one is watching, something inside you still aches. A heaviness that success can't lift. A sadness that logic can't fix. That ache, that's not weakness. That's the child you buried. The one who felt too much. The one who was told to toughen up. The one who got shut down, laughed at, ignored. He didn't die, he didn't disappear, he's just waiting. Waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be held, waiting to be seen. Freud believed that the unconscious never forgets, that every suppressed feeling, unmet need and unspoken cry remains alive within us. He called it the return of the repressed, the idea that what you push down will eventually rise. And it does. Not in words, but in anxiety, in sabotage, in numbness, in panic when people get too close, in tears that show up at night for reasons you can't explain. You're not broken, you're backed up with unprocessed pain. And the longer you ignore the child within you, the more disconnected you feel from everything. From joy, from peace, from yourself. You don't need more willpower, you need reunion. But here's the problem. You were never taught how to sit with pain. You were taught how to fix, how to perform, how to repress. No one showed you how to comfort the inner child. They told you to get over it. So now when those old emotions surface, you shame yourself. You call it immaturity. You call it weakness. But it's not. It's your soul trying to breathe, trying to come home. And the more you resist, the louder the child cries, not with words, but through exhaustion, fear of abandonment, attachment issues, and the constant need to prove your worth. So what do you do when the child shows up? When the ache won't go away? When the old wounds reopen every time you try to love, to trust, to rest? You do what no one ever did for you. You stay. You stop running. You stop silencing. You stop shaming the most sensitive part of yourself. And instead, you listen. You lean in. You hold that part of you that never got to speak. And if that feels impossible, It's because you were never meant to do it alone. This is where Jesus, not the idea, not the icon, but the person, meets you. Not at the finish line of your healing, but at the threshold of your hurt. He doesn't say, be stronger. He says, let the children come to me. He doesn't call your emotions unstable. He calls them holy ground. He doesn't flinch at your pain. He steps into it. And when no one else stayed, he did. When you buried the child, he remembered. When you forgot who you were, he never did. He's not ashamed of the boy who cried or the girl who begged to be chosen. He's the father that walks into your memories, not to erase them, but to reclaim them. He becomes the presence that was missing, the warmth that was withheld, the voice that says, I see you. I'm not leaving. You are safe now. You've tried to become someone else to survive. But he didn't come to love your performance. He came to love the real you, including the parts you've hidden. That's why real healing begins not when you feel strong, but when you feel safe enough to be soft, to cry, to say, I'm still hurting. And in that moment, Jesus doesn't correct you. He holds you. He tells you that being whole doesn't mean you'll never feel broken again. It means you'll never face the breaking alone. The child inside you isn't weak. He's just waiting for the moment when someone finally looks into his eyes and says, you didn't deserve that. You're not alone anymore. Come out and it's safe now. And that voice, that invitation, it's not yours to create. It's already been spoken by the one who knew you before the pain and loves you beyond it.